Hello, I'm Grace Harbison. My maiden name was Grace Harding, and I'm from Nashville. I lived about 2 blocks from Belmont. Growing up in the vicinity, I attended all the May Day affairs from 1931 on,
Wow.
which was a neighborhood, and I heard the chimes daily. So that was my association from Ward Belmont in early years. I attended from 1943 to 1948. I was graduated from the preparatory school in 1946, and in 1948 I finished 2 years of the junior college. In the junior college, I was also in the conservatory and studied in the music department, the vocals with Mrs. Malone.
Wow.
That afforded me the dual opportunities to have all the activities here. And being so close, many people thought I was a boarder here because I could stay over in the evenings and come in for any meetings that might be occurring.
Right.
The early years of the high school was the principal was Mrs. Suby, and she followed Miss Annie Allison, who was here from many in the earlier years of the days when Ward Belmont was Ward Seminary, and in that background, she afforded all the rules from the early 20th century, 18th century practically. So with that, with the subjects that we studied and with the education we got, particularly the preparatory school, was again Miss Hay. And Miss Hay had her doctorate from the University of Chicago and very influential, even though she was a woman far into her retirement years.
Right.
Also, then I had a math teacher, Mrs. Mann, whose husband was also a professor at Vanderbilt.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times she would give us, talk about things going on at Vanderbilt. And then after I finished in '48, I went on to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And just like with Mrs. Valmer, my friend, I majored in history. I also did an English major, and I took a minor in business because of my family, the family needs. I was an only child, and yet my family, being a Harding, were here from the early 1800s, the early settlement, and with that background, that's why I had inherited the property where I live now in Wilson County, and I moved there, didn't move there till 1995, but I had lived in Nashville here until that time.
Okay.
So that's the early reason for my address now is Lebanon, Tennessee. Other rules of the early days, besides the lipstick regulation, and I put on, at 2:30 one afternoon, I put my lipstick on before school was out, and I was turned in. You know, we had a very rigid government for obeying the rules.
Right.
So I got one demerit from that for putting lipstick on for
early.
15 minutes before school was out. And who turned me in that was on the board, I never did find out.
You wonder if maybe it was Miss Velma?
She wasn't in that
I don't
particular
know.
section of the history class.
Okay, well, we'll let her slide for this one.
In college, here, Dr. Mara had the chemistry.
Okay.
And so I had the chemistry with Dr. Mara. I had the biology, that was, Miss Hollinger was very fine in biology. So all those credits assisted me later, and the appreciation for the influence that the faculty had. After Vanderbilt, I went on and finished my master's, and I had no education courses, but I did start teaching in Nashville, a metro school. Well, it wasn't metro then.
Right.
It was the Davidson County schools. So I taught in the Davidson County schools until from 1950 to 1952.
Okay.
And then I started to work on my doctorate, and so I went to California and taught in Los Angeles And I had the, also while I was admitted and I took classes at USC, University of Southern California, but I did not finish due to the fact, not only did I have the demonstration class for, as this was called, the Bellflower School District, which is one of the divisions of the Los Angeles schools, even today. And with that, I had a demonstration class because of my influence from having the Peabody and my master's in additional hours. During that time at USC, I was interviewed for teaching with the government overseas.
Oh, wow.
And I did, from 1953 to 1955, I taught at Yokohama High School. And I was assigned to Japan, and that afforded me, you received, you had a rank of an officer. So with all the military and the Korean War close-up, I could travel space available. So in that way, I had Bangkok and to all these trips around that area. I had, this was on vacation time. Weekends, you could tour the areas like Hiroshima and the important parts of, and you would have free travel. You had access to all the military bases, so that was health and safety, because it was still plenty of remains from World War II.
Sure.
And it influenced me intensely for what I saw from the war. And then as they were closing up, we were limited as teachers, there even in Yokohama, but all over if you were employed with the government. And now it's the Department of Defense. That time it was called Department of the Army. And that was the source that I was in, and they had control of Yokohama, and that was why I was assigned to Yokohama. The other part of the war, in seeing that the Korean, every day the pilots would come in with the Russian, fighting the Russian. We had the DEW line, seeing the Russian, hearing the pilots deal with the Russian MiGs. And this is 1954. Similar, the same things are going on today.
Yeah.
As when school was out that year, I found out that I could decide to return to the States. Oh. And the space available for the troops, so they're bringing troops out, they brought they had Canadian Red Cross women, and they had space on the USS General Mann for 40 women. And this other teacher now, when the ship came from Busan, Korea, to Yokohama, and to refuel and all for the trip back to 2 weeks on board the ship. Also, we went to Adak, Alaska, to pick up military personnel. Wow. 5,000 troops on board. So you were limited. That was the summer of 1954, 55. It was 55 then. At that time, with that limitation, you got to rest and read a lot at sea. But it was very terrible weather, and everything was. I wasn't seasick. Oh, good. So of course, the personnel of the ship were not. They were accustomed to it. That was their life. But several of the officers would come into the wardroom, and who were not seasick too, with all their men in the hold being sick. So one of the officers, actually the commandant of the troops said, "Well, Miss Harding, the only on our manifest, the only person on the manifest is Lieutenant Harbison. You must meet him." Wow. So that is the way I met my husband.
Wow.
And he was bringing to his troops, and so we just So he said, just said, well, you're from Tennessee. Oh yeah, the commandant told me about you, and so we were 2 weeks at sea, and that was our courtship.
Wow, and the rest is history.
Yes. So the story, then after that, he got out of service, and he came to Nashville, but he was from Dixon. His parents lived in Dixon, Tennessee.
Okay.
With that, I had to go back. I was under contract.
Oh, wow.
So with that, the time evolved. The wedding didn't take place till 1956.
Okay.
So I came back and resigned, and he was an engineer with the DuPont company.
Oh, wow.
So that's the story. And then in time we ended back here in Nashville, and our children went to school here.
Wow, and you were in Nashville until the mid-90s.
Yeah, till 95. And in the meantime, I returned to teaching in 1963. So
Okay.
I'm also a retired Metro Nashville teacher.
Wow.
And utilized all of the base of everything was what I learned of the influence from here at Belmont.